everyone. I'm doing my presentation on the book Decolonizing Wealth, and it's by Edgar Villanueva. And he is a member of the Lumbee tribe. He's Native American. They're from North Carolina. And he also is nationally recognized expert on social justice philanthropy, and he has consulted with numerous philanthropy on advancing racial equity. I really like this book. This book was new to me. I haven't seen it before or heard of it until this course, and I wanted to check it out. And it ended up coming in handy for myself professionally as well. I'm currently in working with a group that we're trying to find ways to approach funders or foundations in a getting them to, I guess, fund organizations and agencies equally. And so we're developing a scorecard and whatnot, and it's just a bunch of us in this group working on this. And so this book has been really helpful, just coming across it, and then I'm just been part of this group in the midst of it. And then also, shortly after I finished this book, around it was right whenever the COVID-19 pandemic, or the stay-at-home order started. This group, Native American in Philanthropy, they got a hold of me and wanted to feature our organization that I work for in their blog. So it was great. It was kind of neat. I had some knowledge behind what I learned and where they were coming from, and was able to answer their questions with some meat. Just because of this book, it was super helpful. Anyhow, Edgar, he does a great way of just talking about his culture, and then how people of color, how it is for people of color in the financial and philanthropy world, and on both sides within the foundation institutions, and then also the grantees. And then he also talks about how to use money in a positive way. So the first question here is, what are specific ways that the focal population of the book experience oppression at an interpersonal and a societal level? He discusses the identity of Native Americans, and he talks about in his book how him growing up in the 80s, and when he would write applications of whatever that may be, like schools or getting job applications, how he didn't have a spot to mark his nationality or ethnicity. It was always in the other box where he would mark. I really like his quote here, talking about the Native American identity. It says here, he says, being Native American inherently involves an identity crisis. We're the only race or ethnicity that is only acknowledged if the government says we are. Here we are, we exist, but we still have to prove it. Anyone else can say that they are what they are. No one has to prove that they're Black or prove that they're Latino. There are deep implications to this. The rates of alcoholism, substance abuse, and suicide are linked to the fundamental question of our identity. We exist in the other box. So he talks about that, and one thing about him and where he's leading off of the Lumbee tribe is, and I'm not sure if it's current because it's kind of back and forth, but basically there's tribes that are federally recognized, and then there's tribes that are state recognized, and then there's tribes that are not recognized at all, but they still exist. And so that's what he's talking about here. And a lot of people don't know that, but there's that politics. So basically what he's saying here is the government decides if you are Native or not. And they also can say you are or you're not. They can recognize you or they won't recognize you. So it's really complex and political within that. And then he also talks about how the whole mind about decolonizing, or the whole theme of decolonizing wealth, is at its essence about closing the racial wealth gap. Poverty is a product of public policy and theft, and facilitated by white supremacy. He discusses how um, colonizers are, their mantra is divide, conquer, and exploit. So basically, the wealth from our country was built on exploitation of people of color, and that's basically what this book is about. And he talks about that through and through. Um, he has this really good saying about what unpacking colonization. Here he says, conquering is one thing. You travel to another place and take its resources, kill the people who get in your way, and then go home with your spoils. But in colonization, you stick around, you occupy the land, and force the existing indigenous people to become you. It's like a zombie invasion. Colonizers insist on taking over the bodies and mind and souls of the colonized. I just thought that was a perfect way to explain that, and I thought that just really resonated with me, and so I thought that would fit perfectly with that question here. And then he also discusses, up until now, diversity and inclusion tactics have been about getting different kinds of people in the door. But once they're in the door, then these places, they want you to assimilate like them. So there's not really that inclusion and diversity. And I just thought that was really fitting and true. And like I said, the mantra of colonizers is divide, control, and exploit. The next question is, how do micro, meso, macro dynamics enforce the continued oppression of this group? He discusses how he considers, and then the people that he works with is that are also minorities as the token minorities, that they represent their whole community. And we've discussed in our other course about how they talk about Obama, for instance, oh, he made it, so can you, or why can't you? And he talks about how that's something that is there, and that could be micro, meso, and macro. In these institutes that he's worked in, especially in philanthropy, he discusses financial institutes or foundations are considered the ivory towers. So whenever people are working, people of color are working in these ivory towers, they're communicated. It's like they won the lottery, and then the leadership they communicate very clear that they're replaceable, that they're lucky to be there. And he just talks about how his job through these institutes are like that for them. In a lot of places, these people don't feel welcomed, or people of color. I seen a fitting spot where he talked about at the macro level that it's rare that the funders acknowledge intersectionalities. He talks about how they get stuck in these silos. He said the fact that institutions and identities consist of and impacted by overlapping and interconnected systems of oppression and disadvantages, most stay stuck. Most foundations stay stuck in these silos of, if they're an educational foundation, they're only going to fund education work or education agencies. Also health foundations, they're only going to fund agencies that are health related. So people that are trying to seek funding, they usually have to bend over backwards and fit into their funding area. The next question is, how's intersectionalities considered in the book? And so I kind of explained that, where he's talking about that intersectionalities are not acknowledged in these foundations usually. And then Edgar himself, he's a male, he's Native American, and he also is Christian, and he's educated. And like I mentioned, he's considered like a token, well kept minority, and he talks a lot through and through in the book. The next one is, what critiques do you have about the book? I honestly don't have any critiques. I really thought this was. I'm not like a professional on foundations or philanthropy, and but just starting to um, learn about like how to get grants, how to write grants, and just learning all of that. And so I thought this was really helpful, like I said, with some of the groups that I've been in, and then just like the organization that I work for right now. But I did really like how he discussed the style of architecture of like financial institutions, where, like, for instance, you walk into a bank, and like how the bank is set up, where it's not inviting. It's very, I'm trying to think of the word, but just how like it's just not an inviting place, because you're there to ask for something, and they want you. It's like a psychological theme where they want you to feel like they have the power. So I really liked how he broke that down. He talks about like the colonial style and how that is. And then I also thought of like human service buildings. They can tend to be like that because they have resources that people need to come and ask for. So that also struck out at me. And I thought that was a really good point. And I learned from that. And he talks about how that continued us versus them. That's how they like separate the worldview in these places. He also talked about the vast majority of foundations have like no right to call themselves like they do philanthropy, because he says that philanthropy, when people think about it, they think of money, but that's not really what philanthropy is. He breaks down the Greek root of philanthropy, and phil is love, and anthropos, I think I might have said that right, is humanity, so love of humanity. And so he just says that there's a lot of a lot of these places, they like abuse that power of like money, like you're asking for them. So I liked how he described that, because that was really new to me. And then lastly, part of his book, he talks about how money could be medicine. He talks on the 7 steps of healing, that like money can be medicine instead of causing further harm. And he goes and says, what if funders could help restore a perfect world? What if money could be medicine instead of what divides us? What if, rather than using wealth to cause further harm, we follow the 7 steps of healing? So he has these 7 steps that he advises that can be steps towards like having wealth turn money into medicine. So he and I was just like briefly go over what his 7 steps are, and he discusses, or he includes grieve, apology, listen, relate, represent, invest, and repair. And he just like goes through in detail on what that looks like. And then he also, at the very end, he talks about this all coming in full circle, and how his mother, when she was raising him, she was a single mother, and she worked like 2 jobs, and then on the weekends she would help give back, and or not give back, but she would just take care of people, and she was constantly busy, and he was with her, and she just like always had children loving on, just wanted to be around her, and she would take children to church with her, and she would always like share what she had, and just basically like she was philanthropy, and she was the first example of what philanthropy is. And it was just like a really good story, and I just think this like book is like a worthwhile read. And when I was going through it, because it's been a while since I read it, going through it just to try to get points for this presentation, it like was meaning something else again, just like the information and just like a collective of what we've learned in anti-oppression and everything that we learned in this course and then our other course as well, and all together it was just like the terms and everything that he used in here was making more sense, and I just like really appreciated how he discusses you know equity in these worlds. So I think it's a great read, and I look forward to finding out more what others are also reading.